Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we start New Gate episode 4. Without wasting the time, let's get started. In last episode we see, Ryan is taking down high-level undead in the plains, and she realizes that it would have been tougher if she didn't have the sword that came flying into the castle. She was worried about another soldier party, who was having trouble taking down a huge undead, but Schnee came to their aid, taking down the monster easily. Now, New Gate episode 4. Schnee uses her healing abilities to restore the knight's health, and their captain thanks her for it because they would have been forced to retreat otherwise. Schnee tells him to stop with gratitude since she was only able to take down the undead because they fought it. The captain of the knights is honored to be praised by Schnee. In recent times, undeads that shouldn't be able to leave the ghost plains have been showing up, and the knights were ordered to take them down. Though the knights were having trouble with the undead as a group, the captain was amazed that Schnee was able to take down the monster all by herself. He's not surprised that she was able to do it because she once earned the favor of a high human. Schnee wonders if that was the last irregular undead which the captain mentioned in his report and the captain. Schnee informs her that she's correct. He hopes that was the end of such irregularities, but Schnee decides to keep searching the area in case any other spawns. She informs the captain to activate the magic device she gave him if he runs into any trouble, and the captain assures her he would do so. She bids him farewell and she runs into the forest across the plains, remembering the letter sent by Shin and feeling eager to see him again. Meanwhile, Avis is going against an irregular undead, and he uses his spear venom to strike it down to the amazement of Lasha. He tells her to finish off the monster so she can add it to her score, and she rushes over to heal the monster, but the ground beneath her suddenly starts to glow. Lasha is surprised by this, and Avis is worried about her. But Shin reassures them that they don't need to worry because such an occurrence only happens when the conditions to learn a new skill are met. Avis notices that Lassus is absent-minded, and he wonders if she's all right, but she tells him she is fine. She informs him she was looking absent-minded because her mind was flooded with images of how to use the purification skill. Lasha thanks them both because they'll now be able to save the orphanage. Shin decides they need to take some rest before they leave the sealed area and return to the kingdom of Beirilicht. Avis agrees with him that there's no reason to stick around, but Shin suddenly hears a strange sound from a distance, and he wonders what it is. Avis wonders what he's talking about, but he looks in the magic matter gathering. While Lasha is enchanted by the sight of the matter form, Avis panics because he realizes it's the magic matter that animates the dead. He figures out that the matter is drained from other monsters until they can't maintain their form, and they vanish. The accumulated matter suddenly combines to form a skull-face lord that is level 804, and Avis can't believe that such an unbelievable monster can be formed. Lasha is scared because such a monster can easily wipe out an entire nation, but she takes comfort in the fact that they'll be fine because of the seal in the forest. Shin tells her he's not so sure the seal will hold the monstrosity in front of them, and as on cue, the monster suddenly jumps up and hits the seal overhead. Shin isn't surprised that the seal didn't hold its own against the monster, and Avis confirms that the seal was shattered. Lasha's knees give way under the weight of the realization that they're in danger. The monster returned to the ground, and Avis realized they were its next target because it was staring at them. Avis decides to take Lasha so they can make a break for it, but the monster roars at them, and Avis thinks the monster is roaring at them. But Shin tells him he's wrong. Undead soldiers emerge from between the trees in obedience to their master's call, and Lasha panics, wondering what they should do. Avis tells them to calm down and keep it together, because shouting won't help their situation. He tells Shin they need to break through the soldiers and flee, but Shin informs him he'll be staying right there. Avis wonders if Shin has a death wish, and he tries to convince him they have to run, but Shin decides to take off his limiter to the surprise of Avis. He informs Avis that he can't let the monster run free because the seal has been broken, and he decides to take a stand to stop them so they don't wreak havoc on nearby kingdoms. He tells Avis to take Lasha and Yuzuha and make a break for the kingdom, but Avis is more concerned about who Shin is because of how much power he now emanates. He tells Shin he has some explaining to do when they get back, and Shin promises to tell him everything. Shin decides to cast a physical enhancement spell on Avis, so he runs fast, and he warns him not to trip on the way back. Avis tries to pry Yuzuha off of Shin, but it doesn't let him go, and Avis decides to leave him with Shin. Shin clears the way for Avis using a lightning spell, and Avis zooms off into the distance. Shin summons his sword and he rushes at the skeleton soldiers, but Yuzuha burns Tikum down before he gets to them, and Shin commends it. The Skullface Lord roars again, which makes more undead soldiers emerge, and Shin realizes that the battle will be endless if the Lord is allowed to keep roaring like this. Shin strikes his sword into the ground, creating red lighting, which takes down more soldiers. But Shni notices the attack from a distance, and she decides to fly towards it. Shin is convinced that his attack took down a lot of the soldiers, but he opens up his map to see he's surrounded by a sea of red. He feels lonely because he would have more battle options if he was fighting with Shni, but he suddenly notices a blue marker approaching him on the map. He realizes that an ally is coming his way, and he decides to make a quick detour. Shin's battle and lands in front of Shni. He shyly asks her how she's doing, but the soldiers come out of nowhere to interrupt their beautiful moment. Yuzuha decides to create a barrier between them, and the monster and Shin is grateful for this. He turns back to Shni, but before he can say anything, she buries herself in his chest. She reminds him that he's supposed to say something, and he thinks she wants his apology, but she tells him he's wrong. He then thinks she wants his thanks, but she tells him he's also wrong. Shin thinks hard, wondering what he should say, and he remembers that he's wrong. Shin is then asked to say something, but Shin is not. Shin is to tell her he's back. She welcomes him back with tears flowing freely down her cheeks because she never thought she'd see him again. Yuzuha suddenly collapses, and the barrier wears off. The Skullface Lord starts approaching them, and Shin decides that though they have a lot to discuss, they need to take down the monster first. Shin suggests they both fire a huge attack, so Shni goes with his plan. The monster roars, trying to intimidate them, but they say the incantation for their sanctuary spell, which casts a huge magic circle over the monsters. Turning them all to dust, Shin suddenly summons his sword, and he destroys the monster's crystal. Before the monster goes down, it tries to claw at Shin and tells Shin to give him his power. Shin is surprised that the Skullface could talk, and he's disappointed that he wasn't able to learn anything about it. He picks up the drop from the monster, and since the battle is over, he decides to have a chat with Shni. He recounts to Shni how he went to fight the Origin boss, but after defeating him, some huge doors opened in the boss room. After that, he lost consciousness and woke up on a field. He tells her he didn't just wander off for 500 years, and Shni is glad that was how things turned out. She explains that all the dungeons disappeared, and when other support players said their masters vanished, she figured out that he cleared the Origin dungeon. They were surprised that they remained even when others disappeared, so they decided to look for him. They split into separate groups to look for him since the continent was in chaos because of seismic shifts. Shni was assigned to the Moon Sanctum where she waited for him ever since. Shin was content with her information because his research revealed similar information to him. Shin tells her to stop addressing him as master because it would draw attention to him if a legend like her addressed him like that. Shni wonders how he'll want to be addressed, and he tells her to just address him by his name. She calls him by his name, and Shin's heart almost bursts through his ribcage, but he does his best to hide his emotion. She wonders what Shin will do next, and he informs her that he plans to visit a sacred site he read about while researching the world. He wonders if Shni has even been there, and she tells him she has never been inside. Shin decides to have a look at the place himself, and Shni wonders if he'll return home if he finds a way to leave. Shin tells her he would, and he apologizes for that, but she tells him she expected that to be his answer. Shin asks her how much she remembers from the game, and she tells him she remembers everything. She recounts how she remembers everything from the day they landed in the world together, and she tells him not to bother telling her to forget anything. She informs him that she became more aware when they called the game a death game, and Shin figures out that they knew they would disappear if they logged out. Shin sympathies with Shni, but she tells him they couldn't say anything back then because it would have freaked them out. She tells him they couldn't do anything because they were autonomous back then. But Shin tells her he's having second guesses now that he knows they were self-aware. Shni knows that he would have gone to fight even if he knew they were self-aware, and Shin confesses that he would have. Shni reminds him of his promise to him, and he tells him he'll never be able to do it again. And Shin takes a solemn moment to commit his promise to heart. Shni decides they've had enough small talk, and Shin suggests they throw a party when he returns to the Moon Sanctum. Shni asks Shin about Yuzuha, and Shin informs her that Yuzuha is his partner. He informs her that Yuzuha is an element tail, and she's surprised because though she knew the fox wasn't ordinary since it had multiple tails, she didn't expect it to be an element tail. Shin was surprised that she noticed this, and she pointed out that Yuzuha has 3 tails after realizing Shin hadn't noticed this. Yuzuha suddenly wakes up and greets Shin good morning, which surprises Shin because he didn't think Yuzuha could talk. Yuzuha informs him that its head cleared up after the monster mana cleared up, and Shin figured out that the Skullface Lord was the leader of the Skullface around the temple where he found Yuzuha. He tells Yuzuha not to speak in front of people because normal foxes don't so. Yuzuha decides to communicate telepathically henceforth. Shin tells him he can't pass Yuzuha as a normal fox because it has more tails. Yuzuha has more than one tail, and Shin asks Yuzuha to merge its tails into one. Yuzuha does this, and Shin asks it to always do that when they're around other people. Shin is captivated by how cute Yuzuha is, and though she tries to hide it, Shin notices it. He decides to let her pet Yuzuha, and she expresses her surprise because no one has been able to successfully tame an element tail before. Shin remembers that he sent his comrades back to the kingdom, so he decides they need to leave so he can try to catch up to them. Shin tells him they could have saved their talk if he informed her that he sent some of his comrades home. He tells her their talk couldn't wait because he set eyes on her after so long. Avis is running home with Lasha, and she wonders if Shin will be fine. Avis assures her that Shin will be fine, but he suddenly senses that something is coming up fast behind them. Lasha thinks the monster is chasing them, and Avis decides to stand his ground and fight, but Shin and Shin land in front of them. Lasha faints from anxiety, and Avis catches his breath because adrenaline has his heart pumping. He tells Shin not to scare him like that ever again. Lady Ryan and the knights arrive at the scene of the battle, and they wonder what happened there, which created a fissure in the ground. She recalls how they were surrounded by skull faces after a loud sound, and then they were healed while the skull faces turned to dust when a light suddenly appeared. One of the knights shows Lady Ryan Shin's sword, which created the fissure, and he tells her the sword is the origin. The knight notices a falcon insignia on the sword's hilt, and he tells Ryan that he's familiar with a blacksmith that makes such a sword. He informs her that a high human known as the Black Blacksmith is the most skilled blacksmith of his kind, and he's the only one who can make such a sword. With this, friends, this episode end. I hope you like it. So please don't forget to like and subscribe my channel. I see you in next video. Thanks for watching.